Hello, my name is Evan Wade, and I am a professor of history and social justice studies at San Joaquin Delta College in Stockton, California, where I am also a researcher in the history of Black music. I would like to wish Professor Silvester Henderson and all of the students in the music program at Los Medanos College a happy Fall 2022 Choral Adventure virtual concert. It is my distinguished pleasure to be here today to be the keynote speaker as it relates to your theme, choral and vocal music, the creative artistry of higher education. In other words, why is choral music important in the college setting? As a researcher in Black history, I want to share with you a small segment of my research, which is focusing on America's first famous African American choir. It was attached to a college called Fisk University, which is still around today. When slavery ended in the United States of America in 1865, African Americans had to create their own schools. They created their own elementary schools because they could not go to the schools where white children were going. They had to create their own high schools. But also, in the aftermath of slavery, they created their own colleges. And Fisk is one of those schools created when slavery ends. And Fisk is still around today. There's over 100 historically Black colleges and universities which are around today. The most famous of them, as relates to choral singing, is Fisk University. How do you finance this idea of a college education for individuals who were formerly enslaved? Fisk came up with a brilliant idea. We're going to form a choir, and this choir is going to tour around the United States. And as they tour around the United States, they're going to sing songs that tells about the traditions of Black people in this country. And this births the Fisk Jubilee Singers. The Fisk Singers was the first famous African American choir. They were established in 1871, exactly 6 years after slavery ended. And on top of becoming the first famous African American choir, it also becomes one of the most famous choirs of the 1800s and of the early 1900s. But to understand the story of Fisk University and what they're doing as a college with choral music, you have to understand what Black music is. And so I want to give a little overview about the history of Black music so that we can better appreciate the lessons from Fisk University Jubilee Singers. All right, when it comes to Black music, it has its origins in Africa. As individuals were taken across the Atlantic to the Americas, they brought with them their education, they brought with them their training, they brought with them their knowledge. And one concept that they bring across is the idea of music. In fact, when you study the Middle Passage in the slave ships, folks sang. In African history, African ontology, you created music for every single type of social context and experience that you're going through. You sang songs for jovial occasions. You sang songs for somber occasions. Music was a part of weddings, but also a part of funerals. And so in Africa, you have this concept of singing as a way of expressing your experiences. And in African singing tradition and music making tradition, there were certain type of musical concepts like the pentatonic scale. And this scale that folks sang and played with is going to be brought to the Americas. In the United States, this scale will become the foundation of what we call the blues scale. But also they bring a tradition called call and response. They bring polyrhythms, but also they bring this idea of emotional expression, expressing yourself in song. Your joys, your sorrows, your agonies, your hurts, your sufferings, your good days, your celebrations will all be conveyed in song. And so, in other words, you bring your soul to the singing experience. This becomes a foundation in this country of what we call soul music. But also, individuals brought their knowledge of how to make instruments and their knowledge of how to dance. And they're going to incorporate this in the music making tradition as well. When we look at and we study plantations, there's some musical genres, styles that we now call foundational American music, which have their roots in the plantations based upon African styles of performing. And so when people were forced to work in the fields, they sang because you express your emotions and your feelings. Songs with a religious connotation were called spirituals. And spirituals become the foundation of what we now call gospel music. Songs that were sung that were secular based while folks were working on the fields, they were called field hollers. And field hollers telling about the experiences, sometimes cursing, became the foundation of what we call blues music. But also in New Orleans, as individuals were enslaved in the city of New Orleans, they had a day off on Sunday, and they would gather together collectively on Sunday. And as they gather together, they'll bring their instruments. And in this place called Congo Square in New Orleans, burst a musical genre called jazz. When we look at plantations, there were some instruments that were forged. And these instruments were based on African styles of how to create instruments. One was the banjo, and the other is the drum. Here's an image from John Blassigame, his book called The Slave Community, which you can find in your Los Medanos library, where he looks at the plantations and he creates his sketches of instruments coming from plantations. These instruments were based on African design principles. They were played in African style techniques, but they're made with American material. They're made now for an American setting. So these instruments, as you look at them, they were African rooted, but they're American material and America in terms of where they're played. In other words, we have the birth of instruments that are African American. And when we look at Black music in this country, it's African, but yet it's American. It's interesting looking at the banjo. And let me show you a picture of the banjo because individuals would come together and they will teach generationally the banjo, even after slavery ended. Here's an image, very famous picture from the late 1800s of a grandfather teaching his grandson the banjo. And this grandfather would have learned from other individuals in the community. When we look at the banjo, some banjos were left around on plantations when slavery ended. And you had some whites who would go and visit a plantation, go walk around the slave quarters. And they began to pick up this banjo. And as they do so, they created a different musical tradition called bluegrass. But Black music is important to look at for a few reasons. Black songs, I want you to recognize this, they were spiritual statements, they were political statements, and there were ways of reclaiming the body. As the Black body during a time period of slavery was forced to work in the fields to economically benefit someone else, you fought against that every single day. It's a political statement. And one way of fighting against and inserting your humanity was by way of music. You did song. Song was a way of reclaiming your body, of reclaiming your humanity, of reclaiming your dignity. You have this idea that my body is for commercialization, my body is for my soul. And so you brought your soul to this music. And as you reclaim the body by way of making music, these songs had a spiritual statement and a political statement. And so Fisk, this choir established at Fisk University, a new black college created after slavery ends. This choir is going to tour around the United States. And as they're touring around the United States, they're singing these songs that were forged on plantations. These songs, as they were forged on plantations, are songs that have stories embedded in them, songs that have ways of resisting slavery, code language embedded within them, songs that have African based musical patterns embedded within them. And so the Fisk University singers, the Fisk Jubilee singers, are going to keep these stories and these experiences of forefathers alive by way of song. I mentioned that the Fisk became the first famous African American choir, and they're attached to this university. They also become one of the most famous choirs of the late 1800s going into the 1900s. On top of performing as a collective, they would break into small groups. And so famously, you had a male quartet. And this male quartet will perform a cappella, and they will perform these spirituals. And so I want to play a short clip of a spiritual called Down by the Riverside. This spiritual, we don't know the author. It comes from the time period of slavery, but it was a song that reinserted people's experiences, talks about the humanity of these people, and it embeds African-based techniques. And Fisk is going to present to audiences across the country and the world this rich heritage of singing. As I press play, I want you to be aware that this is not Spotify. This is not present day sound quality, sound audio. We're going to listen to a clip coming from 1909, as Fisk is now recording their songs in the early 1900s. In 1909, the sound quality is spotty. You're going to hear some static, some background noise. But as you hear this static and background noise, you're going to be presented with this rich song history that dates back to the time period of slavery, but also tells a story of Africa at the same time. Down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside, lay down my sword and shield, down by the riverside, and study war no more. I will study war no more. I will study war no more. Study war no more. Study war no more. I will study war no more. I will study war no more. I will study war no more. That's a short clip from the Fisk Jubilee Singers. It comes from this album here, showing some of their catalog from the early 1900s. This is the Fisk Quartet, the male quartet. The major song on this album that they're advertising is Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, which is also a song that comes back from the time period of slavery. Okay. And so, why is choral singing important? Why is it important to talk about stories like the Fisk Jubilee Singers, who are keeping alive a singing tradition from the time period of the plantation? Why is it important in today's time at Los Medanos College to have a choral singing program? Well, for one, studying music allows us to study other cultures. Number two, studying music allows us to study our own culture. All of us have a cultural identity. And in that cultural identity are stories, our experiences, our laughters and joys, as well as sorrows. And all of this is conveyed in music. But also, number three, very important, studying music allows us to appreciate diversity, equity, and inclusion work. The chorale space, the choir space, is a platform that allows us to do diversity, equity, and inclusion work. When we study the music scripts of various different communities, we're able to study historical context. Songs emerge with a story behind them. There's a context behind them. And studying these histories allows us to understand different cultures. But also, music allows us to understand language. Every culture has its unique way of speaking, its unique language. And as we study music scripts, we're able to understand language. Third, we're able to understand experiences. As we study the historical context, the language of music, and the experiences that's captured within music, we're able to better appreciate our own culture and the cultures of other people. And so, with that, I want to just leave you with one more clip, and that is of today's time, the present day Fisk Jubilee singers. As we look at today's choir from Fisk, the Fisk Jubilee singers, I want to say this: I want you to enjoy the sounds, listen to the language, listen to the experiences, understand the historical context that's all being brought to the stage in our today's time. And there are some wonderful schools like Fisk that you can transfer to. Our college, Los Medanos, has a transfer agreement with over 30 HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, where all of your courses that are CSU and UC transferable also count at these schools. And Fisk is one of those schools that's on the partner list. And so potentially you can go from singing at Los Medanos to singing at Fisk University and joining this rich tradition. So I present to you our present day Fisk Jubilee singers. In the Lord, in the Lord, my soul's been anchored in the Lord. My soul's been anchored. My soul's been anchored in the Lord, in the Lord. My soul's been anchored, anchored in the Lord, in the Lord, in the Lord. My soul's been anchored in the Lord, my Lord. My soul's been anchored in the Lord, my Lord. My soul's been anchored in the Lord. Before I take in hell one day, my soul's been anchored in the Lord. I sing and pray myself away. My soul's been anchored in the Lord. My soul's been anchored. As we listen to the Fisk Jubilee singers, you're hearing the experiences of ancestors. You're hearing the emotionalism of ancestors. You're able to understand some of the historical context of the past. It is important, it is vital that in present day higher education, that we have platforms like choral singing, where we're able to understand cultures across the world and what are their experiences, what are their stories, as it's all embedded within music. I want to once again thank you for giving me the time to come today and to talk about the wonders of choral music historically and the wonders of choral music today. It is a creative artistry in higher education. Thank you.